Three, two, one. Quick intro. Welcome, everyone in the U.S. and around the world on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook, and later listening to the show on Baseball Outside the Box podcast. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo, and this is the show which loves to interview baseball's greatest coaching minds who love to challenge the status quo. In case you missed the show, it will be up on YouTube at Peter Caliendo. And finally, all we ask is that if you like the show, please forward it to all your coaching friends around the world at all levels of the game. And check us out on Twitter. That's Baseball Outside the Box. Lots of videos, tips, and future shows. Hey, tonight we continue. No, it's not the Italian-American show, but we do have an Italian-American on the show, a great one. We continue what we call the brain and vision game, where it all starts, a new frontier of baseball development. Our guest, everybody knows him, but I'll just mention a few things about him. Tony Abbatine, performance consultant and college professor who specializes in vision and its effect on mindset and emotions. He is a certified open focus coach. His work in this area of visual psychology has been featured everywhere. Sports Illustrated, you name it, ESPN, New York Times, USA Today, and he works with Major League Baseball. He also works with the USA Women's Olympic softball team for the last 5 years. Hey, let's not waste any time because everybody knows him. My good friend, Tony Abbatine. What's up, Tony?
Peter, how are you? I'm doing good. I'm sitting in New York. We're still on pause, but luckily, we're about a week away from opening up again. So I'm excited to hang out with my paisan again and talk about some stuff that hopefully the coaches and the parents that are listening, maybe they'll find something interesting and relevant to bring back to their players and their teams.
Yeah, and one thing, I have a funny suspicion. I have a hard time understanding that Tony Abbatine's in a pause because I don't think you're ever on a pause. I think you're on the go constantly. There's always great stuff coming out of there, out of your place, and you're always trying to get better as a coach also. I mean, you're a teacher that it's taught all over the U.S. and the world, yet you're always trying to get better. Folks, thank you for being on Twitter, Facebook Live, and also on Zoom. We'll get to questions in a little bit, but we're going to get started with Tony. We're going to have people jumping on. Tony, let's just, the biggest question, obviously, we talked about, the new thing in baseball. I mean, vision, and I don't know if it's new, but kind of explain, because there's so many visual things out there. There's this program, that program, there's this vision expert. Why don't we just start with what the visual aspect really means?
Okay. I think, Peter, even before that, we talk about, and I think it's important for the coaches to understand the swing and then there's hitting. In my opinion, the industry has gotten a little bit too skewed in the way of swing data, right? We all see and read about kinematic sequencing and formulas and the power leaks in the swing. There's so much information out there. I actually feel sorry for the amateur and even some of the professional coaches because it's information overload. The challenge with the visual piece, and I typically say this when I start a presentation, either in spring training or in colleges, a blind man will never hit, or a woman will never hit cleanup on your team, in your lineup. So at some point, when does the visual processing part of hitting become the priority? And look no further, and I've got some stats here. I wrote an article for Baseball America about 2 months ago, and just at the major league level, 5,000 strikeouts with less than 2 outs with runners in scoring position. Think about that number. 5,000 strikeouts with less than 2 outs with runners in scoring position. So at the highest level, if somebody would be able to put a ball in play and possibly get a ground ball to win or move a runner over, there would be more offensive production. So this visual piece, and especially for the metal bats and at the amateur level, where you don't have to have a perfect swing, it's all about putting balls in play. And even at the professional level, every offensive category is premised on what's called count leverage. Meaning that if you go 1-0 or 2-0 or 3-1, all of the numbers, all the statistics at the college and professional level, you're going to have a better chance of getting a hit. And all premised on that, and it's a very simple concept. If you pound strikes and don't swing at balls, wonderful things are going to happen in every offensive category. Now, we all know that, okay? How many times we've told our hitters, Why are you swinging the balls in the dirt? Stay back. How about this one? And this is one I love talking about. Focus on the ball. If there's one thing that the audience tonight can understand, the next time that you tell your hitters to focus on the ball, you should be punched in the face, as we say in New York, because that is not good information. And I'm going to talk about space. I'm going to talk about it's not about the ball. It's about this area where the ball is traveling to. And without sounding like a nerd, because I do have a doctorate in jurisprudence, but I'm learning that the easiest way to teach hitters to understand vision is to get them to understand that this ball is constantly traveling. And I'm going to go through some of the teaching cues that I share with college programs, Olympic teams, and even Major League Baseball teams that are a little different. But I want the audience to be somewhat open-minded with it. But when people think vision, it's not about eyeglasses.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about prescription eyesight. There is, and I typically get this when I go to spring training. I'm cross-examined as to, well, what about virtual reality? What about video occlusion? What about vision training software where you're learning on a computer? And I'm not here to dismiss any of that, but at some point, you as the coach have to use a little common sense and say, if I'm going to help my son or daughter or players that are on my team, I've got to have these teaching cues ready when the game actually starts. And I think that's important, right? 3-dimension versus 2-dimension. So this vision training that right now is at an all-time high, because Peter, if you think about it, we know what the swing looks like. We have over analyzed that. We know what efficiency looks like. So the only thing that's left really to blueprint is the visual part. But here's the problem. We don't know what Manny Ramirez or Barry Bonds or the girls that play for Ken Erickson do. What is their visual search strategy? That's a little more difficult because you can't videotape it and then break it down into these little parts and then put it all over Twitter and say, that's what a swing looks like. That's why this is the most misunderstood part of the swing. But in my opinion, it's the most important part. So think about it, vision, and then I get this all the time. Well, Tony, is it mental? I'm here to tell you that vision is mental and mental is vision. And here's why. The eyes are the only external part of the brain. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that. The eyes are the only external part of the brain. The eyes are the window to the soul. We have all these expressions. So if you're going to talk about the mental part of the game, this was a debate I would have with Ken Ravizza, my good friend, may he rest in peace, years ago. Ken, you keep talking about the back of the brain. Guess what? When the game starts, I don't want to talk about the back of the brain. Hitters and pitchers live in the visual world. So let's spend more time talking about the front of the brain. And can we get this anxiety levels? Can we get this calmness? Can we get this peacefulness by using this part of the brain? So the visual piece, it's involved in the mental part of the game. The swing experts that are here, and I'm not really here to talk about the swing. I want to talk about the K-vest and some of the big things that are out there. And yes, the head has to move probably 2 times in a real good swing, but don't think of vision in a vacuum. Vision is mental, mental is visual, and visual at times is actually part of the mechanical part of the swing. I think once you understand that, and once you realize that when the game starts, talking less about the mechanics of the swing and not getting too deep into the back of the brain with thoughts and all these traditional sports psych strategies that might make sense possibly in the off season, I think people will have a better understanding, and then they can use some of these tools that we're going to talk about much more easily.
All right, 2 things, because I got to ask you this, because all of a sudden I hear this is like a golden thing for me. The head moves probably 2 times. That's 1. And 2, I know you've said this, when I look at nothing, I see everything. Can you go over those 2?
Well, my world changed about 10 years ago when a certain player with the Boston Red Sox, and it's public because he and I have spent the last few years together, and Manny Ramirez, those of you that are too young to know who Manny Ramirez was, he was a pretty good hitter with the Boston Red Sox. I'm in spring training, working with a bunch of no-name, high-miss hitters, and Manny's listening to me talk about not focusing on the ball and stop staring at a release point. And this whole soft focus, fine focus, which works for some, is not what the high level hitters, when you ask them the right question at the right time, described. So I get done, Manny walks over to me, introduces himself. He says, Tony, I'm Manny Ramirez. I have a question for you, right? I recognized him, obviously. He said, you know what? I know that when things are going really good, when I look at nothing, I see everything. And I looked at him and I thought, this is just Manny being Manny, as the expression was. I said, Manny, I don't really understand what you're saying. He said, when I look at nothing, I see everything. And it dawned on me, I remember going back to the hotel that night in spring training, and I Googled that term. When I look at nothing, I see everything. And what appeared was a Dr. Les Femi out of Princeton, who is this renowned biofeedback, open focus guru, who talked about whether you're an athlete, whether you're dealing with anxiety levels, whether you're dealing with any kind of performances, this open focus, this when I look at nothing, I see everything. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, that the better hitters go into this open focus, this diffused attention. And the way in which, the best way to really describe it, Peter, I'm looking at the screen right now. I'm going to blink, or Major League hitters, you'll see them reset sometimes. It's like when a computer is stuck. What do the IT people tell you to do? Well, you're going to reboot it. So, right? I'm Dustin Pedroia, or I'm Manny Ramirez. We call that the Shrek look. Manny would look 400 feet out into the Coca-Cola sign at Fenway Park. That would be his way of kind of stretching or resetting the brain and the eyes, right? And so these guys started talking about this open focus, and I'm looking at the screen now, right? But I'm seeing the screen, but I don't want to look at it. So I can just simply go into open focus right now. I see everything in front of me. I see the space in between myself and the laptop. I see all of the little markings on the bottom out over here, and I can actually hear the trucks going by, and I actually see the lights coming out of the windows in the back. The best way to describe open focus, when you're sitting on a beach, no one has to tell you how to pay attention to the sun, the waves, the sunset, the sailboats, and the seagulls. Your eyes are simply free. That is the best way to describe this open focus. And when Manny talked about that, I realized that for me, for so many years, I talked about the release point. I talked about the window. I talked about let's go soft and let's go fine. The last thing that the brain wants to do during all of this high velocity stuff is having to process two different things going on. So yeah, that when I look at nothing, I see everything is really the premise of what I talk about, whether it's a 12 and under team from Jacksonville, Florida, or it's Major League hitters that really have never heard that before. And then it's a question of explaining how that works, Peter.
When you're using this type of concept that with your hitters, this also carries over into defense, doesn't it? I mean, if you're an outfielder, an infielder, position, whatever it may be, even catchers.
This non-judgmental thinking, this diffused level of attention. Again, this was an article I wrote about a year ago using Mariano Rivera. I was blessed 15 years ago to do an instructional video with Mariano Rivera called Calm Before the Storm. And it was all about how less was better and how efficient that he was. Putting that aside, right, I asked Mariano one question. When you're getting ready to throw a strike, tell me what young pitchers should focus on. You know what his answer was, Peter? Nothing.
Huh, interesting.
So when you talk about open focus and its application to pitchers, if you've got pitching coaches out there that are telling guys to commit to the glove or focus on the glove, the brain sometimes goes into kind of an anxiety level when you ask it to focus too much on a real object. And so sometimes, and you'll hear pitching coaches talk about stay in space. Tim Nicely, who is the master of V-Flex. You talk about a guy that understands space and understands that neurons, right? These millions of neurons that are sitting between you and I and my laptop, right? Do all these different things differently when the brain is asked to stay in this space. So the application of less is better, the application of leave, find, focus alone and simply look at the glove as if you were looking at sunsets, mountains, or ocean? Or how about the middle infielder? I love working with infielders. First step quickness has nothing to do with agility and infield drills. The reason why some really good infielders can react to a ball faster is that they see the space in front of home plate more effectively. So when the ball jettisons out and the ball's about ready to get them, they've created this good ratio. We're gonna talk about, they've learned to pull the ball versus pushing the ball, right? They have learned how to do that more effectively. So yeah, this application is for every part of the field. I'm working with goaltenders and hockey players now that want to, quote, slow the game down or to be in a better position to see it sooner, longer, and clearer.
You know, I gotta ask you this, because you said, and I get it, because I've always said on Twitter and a lot of social media sites, why aren't we focusing on the brain, and why aren't we focusing more on the vision aspect, understanding how all that works and understanding how you're going to train that. But I got to ask about the infield part. Yes, the vision obviously gives you the first step, but if you also add some proper technique, now you've got a bigger advantage.
There's no question that the visual piece chronologically happens first, and this is where I'll sometimes not debate, but just talk to the swing coaches. At some point, right, leave the swing alone and be on time, and particularly at the amateur level where it's not about the wood bat, or for some people that think bat speed equals high performance. You got guys like Mike Trout. Some people might have heard of Mike Trout. His bat speed and exit velocity at times is slightly below average at the major league level. And if you think about what really wins games and championships, okay, the ability to, I call it, duck fart a ball over to right center field, or have a really ugly swing, but barreling up and shoot a ground ball up the middle. And you mentioned about the World Series. I wrote an article looking at Dodgers and the Red Sox in the 2018 World Series. The Red Sox had some of the worst swings imaginable, but you know what? They were on time. They controlled the barrel of the bat, and they were visually superior than some of the other hitters that are going on. So yeah, you do need technique. There's no question that the swing itself is important, but the higher up you go, Peter, I'm saying that, you know what, and especially those of you that are coaching softball here, we're still working with the metal bat. You don't need maximum bat speed. Be less concerned about the perfect swing, and can your hitter learn to be on time? Because you hear that all the time. Hey, it's all about timing. Timing is a function of good information. When the swing breaks down, think about it. Well, you know what? He leaked on her front side. He's lunging. He arm barred. The source of all those breakdowns in the swing is that the information that the eyes got to the brain that eventually got to the muscles of the body, it was off. So if you fix the first part of the swing, the good techniques that you're working on have more of a tendency to be able to be used. But we're in an industry now where we're doing it backwards, in my humble opinion. Right? I guess as you get older, I mean, I'm being diplomatic, but everybody loves to talk about the swing. I go all over the world, and yeah, I own a company called Frozen Rope, so I can talk rotation and linear and sequencing and you know, the turning of the hips and the danger in teaching that and so forth and so on. And I continue to say, look, stop with this nonsense. Look at Twitter. There's no wars going on with the Twitter hitting guys, with the visual guys. Everybody wants to beat themselves up on the swing. I just wish that the next generation of coaches and players spent more time on the first thing that has to happen, right? Since Little League, see the ball. And at the professional level, you've got a whole level of kids at AA that never get to the big leagues. And think about it. By the time they get drafted, they've got bat speed off the charts. They're great athletes. Why is it that so many hitters in particular never get to the big leagues? It has nothing to do with their swing, okay? Their chase rates come off the chart. They have no in-flight barrel control, as I call it, IFBC, a term I keep using all the time. And excuse me, they spend too much time on being perfect and not enough time learning to control what I'm going to call the runway, this area between home plate and the pitcher's mound that hitters have to control. I think once we start doing that, and once the coaches of the next generation start having some meat and potatoes behind this thing. I think this is the problem. Telling a kid, hey, you know what? See the ball. Focus on the release point. I'm telling you, and I taught that for a lot of years, Peter, guess what? If I'm really teaching this, or I'm teaching, out over here, and I'm telling hitters to focus on the release point, and this ball comes out, and that hitter's eyes are still on the teaching cue that you gave them, see it out of the release point, that ball starts coming out. Well, guess what? Now the eyes, their field of vision is on the back of the ball. They are in what's called visual chaos, okay? They will never be in a position. Edgar Martinez talked about, you know what, Tony? I love pulling the ball. I remember in spring training, I sat and talked to him for an hour after he listened to me, which was very humbling, about this topic. And he would put the batting machine on 110, 120 miles an hour. He was famous for that. And I had to ask him a question. Edgar, why'd you do that? He said, you know why? Because at that speed, I had to get in front of the ball. At that speed, as soon as I saw the ball go into that pitching machine, I knew that in order to slow this thing down, I needed to be pulling it and not pushing it on the backside. And I know that's a concept that sometimes people say, I don't really understand. How do you kind of get in front of a ball? Well, if this is the ball, I'm telling you that the really good 14 or 15-year-old, once the ball comes out, they have practice, and the well-intended coach has talked to them about the space that this ball is about to enter. So by talking about release point, talking about watch it out of the window, and these teaching cues, which I use, and I probably hurt kids back in the day, right? Now all of a sudden, the ball comes out at 80, 90 miles an hour, even 70 miles an hour, you are on the backside of the ball. And once that happens, your ability to control that space and let that ball get down the runway and to predict where it's going becomes so much more difficult. That's why we lose so many kids, Peter, at the level of 13. Once they start seeing breaking balls, think about it, right? You get to 13 years old, if you can't hit a breaking ball or chase it, you can't hit a changeup, you start losing. And I think in this country in particular, we need to start making sure more kids continue to play the greatest game ever, baseball. And, you can talk about having a great swing, but if kids aren't having fun, if they're not putting balls in play, it's going to be a tough thing to do. So you're right. And I'm hoping that the coaches tonight, those that have heard me talk before, I've got some great quotes that I want to, at some point, with Major League hitting coaches anonymously, right, that talk about this whole swing versus hitting. And if as a coach, you can understand the difference between swing efficiency and teaching hitters about timing and vision, you're going to be better than most of the coaches that are out there.
Tony, I'm a slow learner, so I'm gonna back up a second, because what I want to get clear a little bit is, are you pretty much saying that you're trying to anticipate where that ball is going to end up?
Peter, do you drive a car?
Yeah, not very good sometimes, but yes.
Okay, well, this is something I remember spring training, New York Mets years ago. I took a bunch of minor league prospects in the van. We're driving down 95 in Port St. Lucie, because they didn't understand that either. And I wasn't very good at communicating it. So I'm driving. I said, hey guys, you know what? You see those dotted lines, those passing lines on the highway? And I'm doing 75 miles an hour. Yeah, coach, we see them. Great. I said, well, what happens when you just look right down at the hood of the car? How fast are those lines are going? Boom, 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 boom. They're going pretty quick. I said, okay, I'm still going to do 70. I'm even going to go 85. I was a former prosecutor at the time. I had my badge, so I figured I'd be okay if I got pulled over. I'm doing 85 now, but I asked the players, hey, do me a favor. I want you to look about 20 feet in front of the hood of the car. Now, those of you that have driven, that should be an aha moment, because as you're driving, if you spend too much time just simply looking down in front of the hood of the car, those lines, the perceived speed, are going faster. Mm-hmm. What happens when you go into, you want to call it open focus, you want to call it front side tracking, you have good anticipation skills. You are now seeing where the car is going and less of where it's been. Mm. And I think anybody who's been in a car can understand that. So now when you're teaching hitting, right, you talk about ball, but you talk about space. And this is, people say, well, it's a difficult thing to teach. I can teach that to a 10-year-old in 10 minutes. You see ball, you go in space. You see ball, you come this way. Because now, all of a sudden, once your field of vision is in front, your ability to let that ball get deeper and deeper and closer so that you have to make a decision to swing later, now all of a sudden is it a swing, is it a strike, or is it a ball? I think that's important. And I'll tell you the other thing, because this is part of this. I hear this all the time. Yes, 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 no. Right, Peter? I mean, you know hitting. You hear that all the time. The mindset of the hitter, it's going to be yes, 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 and maybe yes or maybe no, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, I don't want to say, I think that's not great information for a lot of hitters. Here's a different teaching cue. No, 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 no. No, 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 yes. That mindset, that progression immediately tells the brain, I have time. I can let this ball get into, whether it's the V-flex that Tim nicely talks about, or the go zone, this area 10 or 15 feet out in front of home plate, depending upon the speed, right? I need to let the ball get into this area where the brain now says it's time to make a decision. And think about it, and I run into hitting coaches all the time. Well, Tony, we want our hitters to be aggressive. If they're aggressive early in ball flight, they're going to be really good at hitting a four-seam fastball, because the ball starts telling a story at the tail end of this thing. So this yes, 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 no. If you got a very passive hitter, great. But there's no one teaching cue. There's not one drill for everyone. This is the problem that I see sometimes with some of the hitting gurus, that, you know what, these are the 5 or 6 drills that everybody has to use. I respectfully disagree. And for some hitters that are over-aggressive, for some hitters that are always making decisions too early, that can't stay back on a breaking ball, their chase rates are above average, you need to get them to understand this no, 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 and yes. Is that a difficult thing to do, Peter? I don't think it is, because to me, I guess the beauty of frozen ropes, I have a laboratory of young children. I always tell college coaches, you know what, I can't present it to you unless I can explain it, a concept, with teaching cues that a 9-year-old can understand. And a 9-year-old hitter, or a AA hitter who I worked with this morning, right, when I explained to him about no, 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 and he looked at me and said, well, Tony, everybody in the industry says the exact opposite. That's great. I have no interest in telling you what 97% of the hitters do in the world that are not the top 3%. I've been very fortunate between the Olympic team in the United States and having a chance to be around the best of the best. And I'm telling you that the best of the best are not in this yes, yes, yes mode. And so I think it gets back to your question about stop telling the hitters, look at the ball. Of course you're going to see the ball, but they need to be able to see the ball and look at the space going on. And once you as a coach understand that, you'll be able to explain it. Oh, and guess what? When you're having a catch, Alan Jaeger and I are writing a cool article about Zen throwing. Those of you that know Alan Jaeger, the best of the best, okay? Long toss, the J-bands, but Alan's understanding of meditation, and I'm showing him about open focus. Every time that you throw a ball and have a catch with someone, you're not staring at the release point. You're not focusing on the arm. As soon as that ball gets right here, because you have to catch it, you have to go run and get it. What are you doing? You're creating this space in front of it so you have first step quickness. So once you as the coach understand this, Peter, and you can explain this concept of front side tracking, when I look at nothing, you'll see so much more. You're going to help so many more players on both sides of the field. Oh, and by the way, not to get into speed reading. I was a dumbass in law school. I was too busy coaching high school baseball at the time. I had to learn how to speed read many years ago. You know what speed reading is? It's cheating.
Yeah.
I look at a line and I'm looking at the space in between the characters. I didn't even realize at the time that you know what? I have the ability to now, and I've been able to teach this to some college athletes, that, hey, you want to read better and read faster, have better reading comprehension, and hit breaking balls better? Look at a sentence and simply spend more time in the space in between the words, because now you're getting two for the price of one. You're going to be able to scan that sentence so much more effectively. So yeah, I get a little fired up because open focus, yeah, it's great for baseball, right? I learned from Dr. Femi that this is a great way to solve some of the anxiety issues that we have, the open focus meditation, right? And again, this gets back to very simple. For the people that are understanding this, when you ask the brain to concentrate on space, it has a very calming effect. Not to get into alpha waves and EEG readings, but all the research that Dr. Femi and other really smart people, not me, have shown, and the 3 days that I spent getting certified, when space becomes the primary focus point, all of a sudden now, this mental game that everybody talks about becomes less. You have quietness. You're going to see the ball better because the brain is only really good at doing one thing at a time. If seeing the ball and the space that this ball travels in becomes the priority, that's what the high-level hitters do.
You know, and you mentioned Tim nicely. We did a great show with Tim and my good friend Jeff Crushell from Crush Performance. We're going to do it again, a second one. Outstanding stuff. I agree with V-Flex, and this is all really coming together. You know, when you talk about the scanning, I do it in the mornings. I remember reading the paper. I don't have enough time, so I scan the paragraphs and kind of get the general information. Now, we talk timing. You know, everybody wants to always say, you know, timing is important in hitting. It's one of the most important things. Visual being number one, timing being two, and you just explained some of the timing aspect. How do we teach this?
Great question. And one of the things that I promised in the preview, hitters have 3 visual triggers. When I say trigger, the eyes see something and they need to respond to it. And this is where, whether you're doing tee work, you're doing center toss, you're doing batting practice, we'll talk about training the eyes off of the machine. I think there's some real good application to that. But the 3 visual triggers, and whether it's baseball or softball, the first trigger in any swing, right? Okay, I need to start getting ready. Whether you have the seesaw, whether you're walking away, whether you're a loader, right? The pitcher is going to provide you with a trigger to say, I need to start the process. I think we would all agree with that. We don't time the ball that really after probably T-ball or after 9 and under, right? The hitter's pre-actions have to start based on what the pitcher is doing. So at the major league level, for example, when you see the breaking of the hands, or I mean, at the higher speeds, typically when a major league hitter says, you know what, when I see the glove bar or this action going on, I've got to make my first move. So if you think about these triggers that have to happen, the first one is I've got to be able to, right? The pitcher is going to dictate my first move. The second trigger, the second visual trigger is, okay, now I'm going to look for ball flight. I'm not going to stare at it. Okay, I'm just going to sunset and mountains and oceans. I'm going to be, some people call it soft focus. I don't like calling it soft focus because the whole terminology with soft focus means eventually what? You go to fine focus. No, let's not make it that difficult to do. So first trigger, you got this. In softball, right, you'll see, okay, as soon as you see the pitcher, okay, make any kind of horizontal move or hip thrust move, that's when that hitter has to say, I'm getting ready to hit 65 plus. The third trigger, okay, stay with me, is, okay, I'm going to wait for this ball to get into, I call it the go zone. The go zone is this area that a hitter can train themselves implicitly, or with repetition, realize that, you know what, I can let this ball get to this magical spot that's 10 or 15 feet in front of home plate. Obviously, if you're sitting on a breaking ball or you're facing Chapman, that go zone is going to have to be a little further up this runway. And again, we're calling the runway, here's the pitcher's mound, here's home plate. This area in between is the hitter's runway. They have to mark it. They have to scan it. The more that the brain and the eyes can kind of gauge this distance, I'm thoroughly convinced gives them more information and better prepares them for actual ball flight. I think that's crucial. One of the things that I do all the time when I go visit a college program, I was at University of Arizona in the fall. Jay Johnson, talk about a guy that understands the visual piece of this thing. I've got a quote from him that I actually use. I want to share it, Peter, if I could, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jay Johnson's the head coach, University of Arizona, right? And we got into this debate about swing sequencing and the blast and all the great tools that are out there, okay? Jay Johnson says, and this was in the Baseball America article, swing sequence starts with your eyes reading the pitch. And to me, it was a very powerful statement because, okay, you know what? If our eyes are in a better position to see bottom of the strike zone or to see it coming up, our body will have a magical way of just simply getting organized to be able to hit it that way. So the 3 visual triggers, right? If you're going to teach hitters, guess what? It's all about first move, and that's a function of speed, or if you happen to be looking for a particular pitch. The second trigger that all good hitters have to stumble through will be ball flight, because at that point, then it's all about, okay, ball's coming out, but I can't do like 97% of most people do and overstare at the ball and focus on the ball and find focus on the ball, because if I do that, I'm losing all of this good information that's going to allow me to pull this ball into a spot which becomes the third trigger, which is, I call it the go zone. The line in the runway that says, I can wait for this ball to get to that point and then make a decision of yes or no. The 3 visual triggers. And I don't want to repeat it again because it should be that simple, that in the middle of a game, right, if you're going to really help hitters, that's not the time to start talking about swinging and arm bars and stay back. Hey, Johnny, what are you paying attention to right here? Hey, let's get back to those 3 triggers, okay? Hey, you know what? When you see that, you do that. And let's make sure that when it comes out, you're not looking at the arm, you're not over focusing, because here's the problem. In high stress at bats, when the game is on the line, hitters have a tendency to do what? They over focus. They're going in the wrong direction. When Manny talked about, you know what, the bigger at bats I had against Mariano Rivera, I realized that if I over fixated, if I was really looking for the ball, I would never be in a position to see the trajectory of that cutter that would be coming this way. So I think that's something that will certainly help young hitters, that ball comes out. And again, you can have a catch. Next time you're with your team, those of you that are going to be with your team soon, and you'll probably have some time to talk about this concept that they're begging for. I can tell you that they're going to want more of this vision, mental, visual piece of it. Just start throwing the balls and tell them the following. Hey, get in front of this one. Create some space. See the ball, get in front of it. See the ball, don't look hard at the ball. And you'll be surprised, after 8 or 9 different ways of throwing it to them, they'll start understanding that. But the 3 visual triggers, whether you are a major league hitter or you are a 10 and under baseball player, those three stimuli will be extremely helpful in addressing this never-ending battle of being on time.
You know, Tony, we're going to take a question. I think this stuff's fantastic. Before we take the question, well, let me take the question. Let's take it from Pete Lauritsen. How do you know if a player is making space be the primary focus point besides telling them? How do you know? And then he also asked, I think you'd see it there, the last 15 feet of the flight of the ball or the last 15 feet of the ball flight, which is more important?
Well, the last 15 feet of ball flight. And again, that is a random number depending upon speed, right? At the major league level, they've got to make decisions typically at that 12 to 15 marker, okay? So yeah, this is the last, if you take home plate and you mark out this 12 or 15 feet, so it would be at the end of ball flight. How do you know that your hitters are staying in space? I think it was the coach that asked, because they're really good. Because when you watch them take a pitch, they are still on their legs, okay? You want to start evaluating hitters? This gets back to some practical hints. Stop throwing balls right down the middle of the plate. In real games, they have to take more pitches than they have to swing at it. Yet we have coaches with the best of intentions that continue to throw mommy balls, Peter, mistakes over the middle. Your guys don't need any help with that pitch, right? And I know this is, we want them to feel good. There's a time and a place for them to feel good. You can give them their feel good round at the end of it. But if they can start, if you can as a coach start saying, you know what, I am intentionally not going in the strike zone. I know at some of our facilities, and even in spring training, when some of the coaches will say, Tony, how do we modify some of our drills having nothing to do with mechanics, get out of the strike zone, right? Because by getting out of the strike zone, you're forcing that hitter to create more space, okay? Because now you're giving them a little bit more time. Your better hitters do this instinctively. No one had to tell Manny Ramirez or Edgar Martinez, or I remember having a chance to ask Barry Bonds one question through a mutual friend, right, about this topic. And Barry Bonds said, you know what, all these guys go up there trying to hit the ball. I'm trying to catch it. I'm just going to try to catch it. I'm not trying to hit it. And if he was up there trying to catch it, Barry Bonds had no fear of being late, okay, which all great hitters have no fear of being late. That's why they can allow and lengthen up the runway so much better than that. But it gets back to the way in which we practice. If there's only 6 to 8, I mean, a typical hitting progression, hey, you know, I'm going to take a round of 8 or 9. Well, at the major league level and even at the amateur level, Peter, I'll ask you this question. You're smarter than I am. How many pitches do you typically get in an at-bat in a game of baseball?
5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5,
okay.
somewhere around there.
I think last year at the NCAA level, it was 5.3. So let's say 6.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a really good coach, if you're the master teacher and you understand this vision is mental is visual, you got to allow hitters to learn how to do nothing. You've got to pull them out, allow them to reset. If you're talking about breathing routines, if you're asking them to reboot their eyes, right? If you're asking them to be much more aware, they've got to learn how to pay attention really good for 5, not 9, not 10, or not 12. And this gets back to, well, how do you know that they're understanding the space concept? I'm telling you, whoever asked that question, your 12-year-old that doesn't swing at balls in the dirt, they understand, you know what? I am not going to do like 97%. I use that number arbitrarily, but the majority of hitters that spend way too much time when this ball comes out, this is the real ball, and they get stuck over here, and they'll get away with that in T-ball and 10 and under and 12 and under in softball. But at some point they start realizing, you know what? This is the real ball now. I'm going to still see this ball, but I need to be having this space in front be my primary part of where my field of vision is, where this box that I'm looking at. And once they stumble into that, it becomes magical. All of a sudden, it's like, holy mackerel, for the first time, I'm starting to see where the ball is going, which gets back to, and this is my opinion, stop talking about spin. Hey, did you see the spin of the ball? Our friend Tim Nicely tells us, and other people have said the same thing. The brain does not have time to measure spin. I remember asking Edgar Martinez that. He goes, Tony, I never saw spin. He said, these guys that are looking for spin, you know what they're doing? They're fine focusing. They're looking so hard at the ball that guess what? They're not seeing the space in front of it. And so some of the teaching cues that we've been using that I was guilty of for years back in the day about look at the spin. Hey, it's spin of the ball. You've got all this information now between Rapsodo, which is great information for the pitchers, but now it's starting to spill over to hitting coaches. Hey, did you see the spin? Hey, you see the spin rate on that? No, right? Spin is all about giving you information that if you stay, again, in front of the ball, you're going to start seeing trajectory or a reduction in speed or a droppage of the ball. That's what good hitters do. That is trainable. This has been the last probably 10 years since Manny said, when I look at nothing, I see everything. Trying to explain this to Little League coaches. To me, that's the ultimate challenge. Big league guys, good luck, okay? They've got their own stuff. They do their thing. I think they're going down a rat hole with some of this vision training that is static, that is not three-dimensional, that if you're going to teach vision, you better do it standing in a batter's box with live pitching going on. That's where the transfer of this information can come in. And I think that's where those of you that are not coaching major leaguers, and most of you are not, you can understand and you can teach them about this beautiful information called space that they do instinctively or at times because we as an industry have taught too much about fine focusing, focus on the ball. And we know that in high stress at bats, we have a tendency to, I'm really going to see the ball come out this time. I'm really going to focus on the ball. I'm here to say, and having done it the wrong way for years, you need to get your hitters to realize that is not what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at that picture as if I'm looking at a beautiful sunset. I'm going to stay with my 3 visual triggers, and I'm going to be more concerned about the space that this ball is creating as it comes down this runway until I have to make a decision in this line in the dirt, if it's softball, or if the grass in the baseball field that you've just looked at a second before ball release, to remind yourself where this magical go zone is. Kind of rambled on that one, Peter.
No, but I do want to get to this. I'm going to get to a question here in a second, but I want to ask this, a couple things. And you tell me where I'm heading in maybe in the wrong direction here. One, the importance of that first 15 feet, you know, as a hitter, especially at the high levels, I've got velocity, location, type of pitch. I mean, I would assuming the brain has to calculate some of that. That first 15 feet, one, that's got to be critical, I would think, just comment, you know, from a common sense standpoint. But you talked about the last 15 feet. The other part is, if I take pitches really well, I think that's what you mean when you say I'm on my feet really well. When you take pitches well, that tells you that they've got a pretty good visual ability, correct?
I think when you talk to pro scouts or just college coaches, when they see a hitter, right, I call it hold on to, you know, have their hands still in the cradle, and they're still in their legs, or they still have inside knees. They still have balance. One of the things that I've learned is that, and this is a teaching cue that I loved, not because I made it up, but it resonates well. Every good hitter passes through the library. And I use that with student athletes all the time. Well, why are you calling a part of the swing the library? Because if you ask students, hopefully some of them will know that in the library, you have to be quiet and what? And you read, right? Every hitter has to pass through this part of their swing where they become quiet, and they're now saying, I need to read the way in which we're talking about reading and guiding this pitch into the strike zone. So the take becomes buying them more time. And the hitters that take pitches better, because as a youngster, somebody was smart enough to tell them off a tee at the last second, if I say no, or if I drop a ball over on the side, and if they're in open focus, they see the ball drop, and they actually take a pitch off a tee, right? Because they're in this open focus, you are teaching them about the library. So it's not A, get ready to swing, and C, I see it over and over again, this cardio hitting, right? We want to feel good. We go on a batting machine. It's the same speed, and we're going from A to C. We're crashing through the library. There is no, at some point, I've got to be quiet and I've got to read the pitch. And you don't get that if you're throwing more strikes than you are balls. And that's something that happens way before the season starts. That's about routines. That's about pregame work. That's about at times being annoying, because most coaches are throwing strikes. All right, we're just working on our swing. Well, stop working on your swing, right? Let's work on taking a pitch, because in a game, you take more pitches than you hit, okay? And the only way in which you're going to reinforce this middle part of the swing, which I'm calling the library, is by having them say yes or no to that pitch. I think that's crucial. And the way in which we teach hitting at the younger level is throw strikes, keep throwing strikes, keep throwing strikes. Let me throw it right down the middle of the plate. And we lose our ability to teach this no, 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 and to get hitters to have this, it's not a pause. They're not stopping their swing. It's a mindset that allows ball flight to continue a little further. And we all know that all good hitters do what, Peter? They wait longer to hit. And this is where the K vest and some of these great pieces of equipment are going to be extremely helpful in the way of having a good swing. Okay, we can wait longer if our swing is more efficient, but you still have to be able to do what? Predict ball flight and where the pitch is going to be. And at the highest level, and I'm saying from high school and beyond, hitters are basically estimating time to collision. They don't see the ball hit the bat like T-ball does, okay? Mm-hmm. Hitters are playing applied geometry on the fly. They see the ball at that go zone, the area in which they've got to start their swing, and they're simply making a prediction where the barrel needs to be. You're not going to get better at that if you're constantly going from this setup position to the swing itself.
You know, and that's kind of like the catcher too, right? The catchers, I mean, if they're going to catch a certain pitch, they've got to beat that pitch to the spot.
You know what? I've always said, I had this discussion in spring training. How come pitchers aren't the best hitters? Well, they spend so much time in the bullpen, they get beat up, right? It's all about defense. Good catchers front side track and create and manage the space. They have to do that because you're not going to be a high level catcher if your glove gets to the spot at the same time. They are anticipating ball flight. Yes, it's helpful for them because they're the ones that know where the ball is going, but their visual search strategy, the way in which they're tracking a moving object, is exactly what high level hitters are doing, right? And that's something that if you've got a catcher that you're working with and they're just always a little late to the party, their receiving skills are always kind of, hey, you know what? This is a discussion you have to have with them. When you see the pitcher get here, young Johnny catcher, guess what? Cheat. Get in front of him, okay? Let's create some space. And now all of a sudden, that ball is going to appear perceptually slower, and you're in a much position to get the glove, or what the hitters do, get the barrel to where they think collision point is going to be.
And Tony, I want to we'll get to some pro guys too, because of, you know, now you're seeing a lot of variability in batting practice. You're seeing guys that, you know, they're having pitchers throw and then throw different pitches. Times are changing a little bit. But before we do that, younger players, if you're just starting off with them in this type of concept, I remember when I had the young kids, I'd always, you know, we used to, toss the ball in those days underhand for whatever reason. And we always threw it straight to let them hit it for a little bit. But then I started realizing, why am I not throwing it slower so that way they can understand how to time that pitch? Where do you start with this?
Well, how about this one? You know what a selfie is?
Yeah, we can take it.
Yeah, selfie, right? Well, guess what? I created the ultimate hitting drill. And I always run things past my son and daughter who were playing college baseball and softball because it has to sound cool, because I don't want to embarrass them when I bring it out into the world, right? So to me, the best hitting drill that you can show a young hitter is that they get into their stance, okay? They take a ball, okay? Right? They're going to start with their hands a little bit higher than usual because they're not going to have much time. They're going to toss the ball up in the air, okay? And they're going to, at times, throw it in front of them, throw it right off the front knee, or throw it slightly behind them, and sometimes throw it out of the strike zone. That's called a selfie. So they're going to learn timing. They're learning the library. Now that the library is coming in this direction, they're learning patience. And now you're introducing, and by the way, what I'm describing is fungo hitting that nobody does anymore. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised how many high school and college hitters you tell them to fungo hit. That's not cool. But if you say it's a selfie, oh yeah, what do you got? And I show them this and they get all disappointed. Wait a minute, that's just fungo hitting. Let's see if you can take a ball, toss it up in the air, wait for that ball to get into the hitting zone that you want, and unload on it. And when you get better at it, throw yourself a changeup. Or if you're really good, toss it outside the strike zone and see if your hands are still in a what I call the cradles are still up and you're still on your legs. That, to me, if I was coaching a little league team, I would start with that drill. I would introduce selfies, parentheses, fungo hitting. And the nice thing about that, especially if you're out on the field, Peter, you get feedback. It's like going to a driving range, right? If a kid can't unload, right, all of a sudden now he starts seeing top spin or he starts seeing backspin, right? He's a launch angle guy and he wants to get the ball up in the air just a little bit. That, to me, is the ultimate forum to be able to do that. You're getting a chance to see. I know in the Northeast, we sometimes are stuck inside all the time, but we'll do selfies inside a hitting tunnel. And you'll be surprised at the amateur level how many kids won't be able to hit it. And they'll get frustrated and they'll learn, you know what, I have to start my swing sooner. I have to time this thing. I don't have to have a big swing. Let's just see if I can get a barrel to the back of the ball. And that becomes the beginning of introducing timing. And to your point, you're not throwing it hard, but it's becoming challenging for them. And you can do that with 12 players at the same time. That's a big problem at the amateur level with batting practice. We don't have 6 guys like the college guys do. you don't have 15 guys in spring training throwing batting practice. So what do you do as a youth level coach where you got 12 guys that need to get their swings in? To me, they're going to do selfies down the left field line, and they're going to do it over and over again. And you're going to stand behind them and say, okay, change ups, okay, breaking ball in, right? Let's see an inside pitch. And now all of a sudden, you're also teaching them contact points, and they're getting, on their own, they're getting used to, my barrel needs to get to this particular spot on that particular ball, and they're controlling it themselves. Not sexy, but the selfies are something that I think would be tremendously helpful.
Love it. Love it. I want to take a question here from Pete Lordson. And it's interesting. He mentions Tim Nicely, Peter Fady, and yourself. Some of the commonalities amongst all three of you guys, and maybe some things you differ on training and vision. It'd be interesting one day to get all three of you guys all on one show too. That'd be a lot of fun. Yep. Because, when we talk about differ, which is nice because you have to, it's nice to be able to exchange ideas, but also say, well, I think this, and that person's going to say, well, why? And then show them why. And now the brain's really going fast and moving and learning, I think. But go ahead.
I happen to know Tim and Peter. These are two of the smartest guys in this industry. They get it. They at least are talking about the visual system and how we can really improve hitters, and are not simply down the rat hole, in my opinion, of swing efficiency, and we're going to swing. We got a generation of kids that look good at showcases that have great exit speed, bat speed, but they can't hit, okay? Tim is someone that I rely on a lot. He has educated me on space. He has educated me on this neuronal space that goes on. His V-flex is my go zone. Right? The tool that he uses and how he uses it, he puts this in the runway, one of the teaching terms that I use, and if it's in that area, we go. And Tim will talk about implicit training, and he'll talk about how the formation of this patented V-flex that he has, the brain is sending messages, and if you repeat over and over again, the brain, once you take the V-flex away, will be able to start patterning and realize, yes, it's a strike. Yes, it's a strike. Yes, it's a strike. There's no question. I think where Tim and I at times respectfully disagree, I'm saying there's more information before it gets to the go zone or for the V-flex. I think talking about how learning how to quiet the back of the brain gives us a little bit more information as to where that ball is going before it enters the go zone or the V-flex. Peter talks at times on, and I've, the software, the video occlusion, pitch recognition. If I'm a college athlete, time is our most precious commodity. I'm not saying that you're going to not get better by the vision training software. I think most of us have seen it. A ball gets thrown and you see the black part, and there has to be a prediction as to where that ball might be. What I would say is, well, you know what? I need more information, number one. That screen that I'm looking at is two-dimensional, so according to Tim, there's no space there, and to the extent that there's no space there, right, our brain is not really interpreting it as if you were outside in space. So to the extent that you have a transfer of, I'm getting better at the occlusion training, and it's showing up in a game. I don't think anybody has been able to show that yet. That's no different than the virtual reality. Great stuff, right? But will it at some point statistically make players better? But I do have objections, because as I have learned, 3D is where the brain wants to live. And a lot of the vision training that I loved, and I looked at it, and anecdotally, I thought we got some kids better, but once Tim and some of the people he's introduced me to have said, hey, you know what? Don't mess with neurons. Don't mess with space, okay? And once I realized that, I needed to talk vision, not in a vacuum, but in this world that we all live in, that hitters have to live in also. So I think this commonality, this is it, right? The three of us are trying to get there, I think, in slightly different variations.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I love it. And again, with Tim, even I had to even think after the show was done, go over some things myself because, it can get a little complicated at times, but we want to keep it simple. Here's what I want to ask you, because I'm familiar with some of your stuff and I've done some of your drills. Now, some people are going to get on me a little bit, and they have on social media once in a while. I'm not a big fan of the actual T-ball game, so I don't want anybody to misinterpret this. I'm talking about the actual game.
Yep.
Because I think it could be a smaller, quicker game for young kids to make it more fun. But that's a whole different talk. When it comes to tee, obviously I have no problem with using the tee and all that, but you have a very interesting concept in using the tee, because I asked a question last time on the show to you. I said, I don't understand why we're looking at the tee and we're hitting the tee. Shouldn't we be looking out at somebody out there with a ball? And you added even more stuff to it. Can you go over that? Because I'll add some drills too.
I remember talking to a Little League team about T-ball, and I said, hey, great, but at some point, the game is played horizontally. The teaching cue that I use, Peter, we're going to work short, but we're going to look long. And I think that applies even to center toss, right? The majority of us, when we're working with hitters, we're 10 feet away, right? Game starts, and all of a sudden that young hitter has spent the offseason and pregame, I call it slam, jammed, and crammed. Their eyes have been slam, jammed, and crammed either on the tee or on center toss. What if we had a visual challenge, or before they started their swing, they had to look past the tee or even past the center toss? I know my trademark claim to fame when I go to spring training, the first thing I do, I go buy hula hoops. And I put hula hoops on the back of the tunnels. Pisses off some of the pro guys, but that's okay. This is America. We can do what we want. But it's my reminder to tell the guys that, hey, if you're going to hit, put the ball on a tee, and let's see if you can actually, right, start your eyes on the back of the tunnel, 60 feet, 6 inches, because that's going to be the runway or the ball flight distance once the game starts, and see if you can take a swing, okay, and not look at the tee, but you'll see it. This gets back to understanding I can see the tee without looking at the tee. Putting your head down has nothing to do with seeing the ball better. Those of us that sometimes, hey, get your head down, see the ball hit the bat. No, no, the head has nothing to do with it. You start over teaching head down, see the ball hit the bat. Now all of a sudden you're starting to track a moving object in a way in which, if you believe that there's a man upstairs, this is not how human beings were built. You've got all kinds of posture issues that the swing coaches will tell us. So yeah, use the tee, but don't look at it. You'll see it. And let them take a swing. I'm right here. Okay, I'm looking out, right? You can get into some routines, right? The power of the breath. You can use some imagination, right? You can have them practice the trigger, because even at 12-year-old, they're going to have to wait for the pitcher to do something. Now they can practice that in their mind's eye. We know the power of visualization and imagery if it's done over and over again, right? We have all these neuronal pathways that are being encoded that becomes reality. Great. Just don't let them look at the tee. And again, I'd make it easier. Most of the frozen ropes around the country, right? Put a marker on the back of the tunnel to remind your coaches and your players, work short, look long. To me, getting the eyes to be, quote, open and to be stretching them out gives them a better chance of taking that swing and being better visually prepared once the game starts.
And on a T-ball, if you have a coach, I think you mentioned this, tossing, looking like he's going to toss a ball, because don't we have to prepare them after T-ball? You're going to pitch ball, so don't we have to prepare them for the same type of game type situation?
Yeah, actually, I remember doing this for the first time, and Ken Erickson, who's the tremendous, he's an intellect, he's a great coach, he's the head coach of the United States softball Olympic team. I remember the first few years where we would use the tee, and Ken and I would talk about work long, short, and whatnot. And I saw him for the first time. He actually put an L screen, right? So the tee's over here. I've got an L screen in front of me. I mean, this is softball, but for the baseball guys, use your imagination. Mm-hmm. So you had the coach actually throwing a ball into the screen. So now you're practicing all three visual triggers. When the coach moved, you moved. The second trigger, when the ball came out, that hitter was starting to understand it's not about looking at the ball, it's about seeing it and getting in front of it. And if I threw the ball, and if it wasn't even near where that tee was, you would have a kid off a tee take the pitch. But now you're actually syncing up the swing with the delivery of a pitcher. So the coach is never throwing it. If he happens to throw it kind of on line, the kid who is on the tee on the other side takes a swing. But if the coach doesn't throw a strike off the tee, he takes it. And I can't emphasize that enough. Spend more time awarding and making kids feel really good about taking a pitch. Oh, come on, coach, give me one more strike. No, I'm going to give you 8. 4 of them are going to be maybe in the strike zone, 4 might not be, okay? Start making taking a pitch, them saying no, just as important and gratifying as them actually swinging at a ball in the strike zone. That's the beginning of changing their mindset and getting them to understand this no, 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 maybe, no, 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 yes, instead of this yes, 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 maybe, no, which I think sometimes doesn't work.
You also had a drill that I used a lot, and I just started to realize you taught where you were tossing balls to hitters, and you might have a catcher, so you might be throwing it.
Yep.
And the hitter, yes, was saying no, 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 and then yes, but also he had to say it where the location was as early as possible. And what I recognized was that they were saying it almost when the ball was like over the plate.
Right.
They weren't saying early enough. Talk about that. Is that a good drill?
This gets back to, I call them, you know, when I'll visit college programs, you got all the pitchers, even in spring training, we'll do this sometimes. You get the hitters. If you're going to change somebody's VSS, their visual search strategy, you're not going to do it in the middle of a game. Okay. So by getting hitters, you got bullpens going on. They stand not in, eventually they can do that. Sometimes the pitchers don't like that, but they're standing behind the net. And they're actually practicing the things that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And the logical extension to that, you'll have the hitters either internally or out loud, depending upon how many hitters are actually sitting there, going from the setup to the library. They're actually going to learn and adjust for them to say yes or no later. And yeah, there are some balls right out of the hand that good hitters, because of this Rolodex that they build, they know that's not going to be a strike. Mm-hmm. But I find that the better hitters, right, you'll hear them internally or outwardly say yes or no a little bit later. And again, if it's all about see the ball longer, if we know that, guess what, the more information we can get in this runway is giving us more information, that's a great drill. Anytime that you've got pitchers that are throwing, I would stop any of these static hitting drills and get your hitters to stand in, either literally stand next to the catcher or behind a screen, and let them go and practice their 3 visual triggers, as we talked about it before, and let them internally say yes or no. And again, depending upon the hitter, there are some hitters that you have to stay with the traditional yes, 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 no. But the hitters that are jumping out of their shoes, the hitters that can't hit a breaking ball, the hitters that continue to have chase rates, that whether they're swinging at the rise ball, every time there's a changeup in the dirt, they're swinging at it. Those guys are just making decisions too soon.
That's a no.
They have to be the no guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be helpful in getting that internal chatter, more gear for their type of hitting.
You know, Mark Lynn's got a good question here. I like this. It says, in your mind, is there an ideal distance to throw batting practice from if gathering information along the runway is so important? Dual machines or a coach thrown pitch, distance-wise? Because, you know, we talk about, and I'll add that, we'll talk about you here, you know, if you're going to be at a certain, if you're going to make the distance shorter, you also have to be at the same height of that release point. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, Peter, you would stay at 60 feet, 6 inches. If it's softball, you'd be at the 43 mark. You would have what I call natural runways. You would have the actual distance so that there's not this disengage or there's a disconnect. Now all of a sudden you're coming in shorter. That's not practical though. Most of the hitting drills are done shorter. I like, you know, and again, you can debate this, you know, if you put it closer, I think the closer you put that L screen to the hitter, you're starting to shorten them up. You're forcing them to have to make decisions sooner, which, as we said before, becomes a tougher thing to do. Their go zone, this internal marker, is almost literally have to be on the plate because you're only 15, 20 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
So in a perfect visual world that you're preparing your hitters to hit in, yeah, you want to have them at that distance. I've actually played with going a little bit further. I know with some of the softball girls that I work with, I'll go 45, 47 feet because that'll give them a little bit more time to start understanding and creating the space that we're talking about, even off machines. Most hitters don't like hitting off of machines. And why is that? Well, you'll hear them say, well, I'm going to put the ball in the machine and the ball kind of jumps out.
Right.
You hear that all the time. Ah, man, my timing's all screwed up. Well, guess what? The reason why most hitters don't like hitting off the machine is that they are stuck and they are looking at the wheels of the ATEC or the jugs machine. They are fixated on the source of where the ball's coming from. Compared to what? What I'll tell hitters, I'll do this in spring training. We'll put the machine up to 130 miles an hour, right? Where the speeds that Edgar Martinez talked about. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to put the ball in, but in order for you to get in front, in order for you to pull it, not push it, in order for you to get in front of this space that will better lead you into your go zone, you better take a position about 10 feet in front of that machine. So when the ball goes in, you're here. The problem is most hitters, the ball goes in, and where are they, Peter?
There. Yeah.
They're here. Ball comes out. Guess what? They're dead. They better hope it's a four-seam fastball that doesn't move, because now all of a sudden the eyes go into panic and have to start chasing it to see where this thing is going.
Real quickly, just on the machine, you might be better off starting the machine back, like you said about the pitching part, right?
You can do that. I mean, depending upon the space.
Yeah.
I know when I'll visit colleges, I'll actually put a marker. I'll literally get some rope and say, okay, here's the machine, and right across the tunnel, I'm helping the hitters understand that it's not about the machine, it's not about the window, it's not about the release point. I will see that, but I'm going to have my look, okay? This space that I need to control, I'm going to help them set it. So picture a shoestring right across the tunnel that sits 5 to 7 feet in front of that machine that's going to blast them. So now when the ball goes in, right, they're in this, oh, I got it right here. I'm just going to sit right here, right? They still see the machine. They'll still see the arm, right? Someone said, Tony, oh, so you're telling people not to watch the release point. No, I want them to see the release point, but if you over teach that, this area here, right, this space that we live in, that the ball has to travel, you are screwing up with the ratio. You will never be able to have them predict it. And I think that's the easiest way when you're using machines, even if you don't have the luxury of putting something across the tunnel, Pete, hey, guys, when I go here, you go there, right? When I put this ball in, don't get sucked in like 97% of the other eyes that play this game. You're going to cheat. You're going to visually stay in front, okay? You will still see the machine, but the field of vision, this world in which we live in, you're going to be more concerned about the front or getting in front of where the ball's coming from, which will allow that runway to be much more manageable.
Tony, great question from a good friend of mine, Jeff Crochelle, who works with MLB, travels the world on athletic development, performance. You know, he says, do you have any thoughts in our, excuse me, let me back up a second. No, the idea of mixing the distances up to challenge players. So variability, you know, do you just keep changing it back and forth, changing speeds as well, instead of keeping it the same spot, because that's not really what happens in a ball game.
Well, I think variation of speeds is good. You know, all the research on variance and putting hitters in, I call it visual chaos. I think that's good. The unpredictability of both speed and trajectory, I like that. To me, again, in a perfect visual world, the source is still the 60 or the 45 feet. I think changing that up is good. I think changing up and throwing change-ups from center toss is a great thing to do. I think anytime that you can challenge the hitter to spend more time in the library, and I know I keep using teaching cues that's part of my Bible, quiet and read, okay? You are never going to develop a high-level hitter if 90% of their swing or pre-practice doesn't force them to simply internally and visually let the ball get closer to that magical go zone area. I think that's so important. Throwing changeups. If you happen to have a machine that can give you a variance, you can throw the slider curveball. You'll see colleges that have the machines. You know what? We're gonna double up changeup, or they happen to get the scattering report of the opposing pitcher, and they know they're gonna just go hard in and change up away. I think that's tremendous because to me, anytime that you don't have that, I know it's coming, you're forcing that hitter to stay with their 3 visual triggers, and you're forcing them to realize, you know what? I need to take my swing and leave it alone and trust my eyes. And that's what good hitters do, Peter, right? How do you get a hitter to just let go of the swing and be more concerned with their routine, understanding the power of the breath and how that centers what goes on? And this is the holy grail. How do you get them to not focus on the ball anymore? And realize that it's the space. The one thing, I love going to University of Arizona, not because they're really good and Jay Johnson's a good guy and whatnot. Every time that I go there, we take a field trip and I bring all of the hitters, it's comical, right? And we just walk up and down the runway, right? We put hitters on the pitcher's mound because they've never seen the runway from that angle before. I am convinced that the more those hitters spend time in this area that they have to control, it becomes more familiar. It's like a dog marking the lawn, okay? I've been here before. You see major league hitters at times, they're getting ready to hit, right? And they'll actually draw these lines right from the dirt all the way up to where this imaginary release point will be. The not so good hitters that'll come in, and all of a sudden they're locked in on the pitcher, right? They're staring at the bill of the cap, they're burning a hole in the chest, and they're waiting for the magic window to open up. The better hitters, and I asked Edgar this question, I showed him video footage of it, you would see him kind of looking out in center field. Barry Bonds talks about, you know what, I kind of gaze out into the outfield, and then once the pitcher starts moving, I'm kind of coming in from this direction, a concept called directional selectivity, right? Some hitters will get to this release point from a lot of different angles, depending upon the pitcher. Or how about this? The reason why lefties can't hit lefties sometimes. This is a hot topic in college and pro ball, right? Well, I'm a left-handed pitcher right now. I'm facing a lefty. If I take the traditional, okay, I'm going to come here, right, chest, bill of the cap, and then come out this way, well, guess what? I'm going out at this point with my eyes. My VSS, my visual search strategy, is going in this direction. I'm pulling out with my eyes. What is the biggest problem with lefties on lefties, Peter? They're pulling out. And they're pulling out, in my opinion, it's because their eyes, which are the starting point to this sequencing, is moving them in the wrong direction. That the better way, or what really good hitting coaches will start presenting to the lefty-lefty matchup will be, hey, you know what? You want to be coming in from this direction, or you want to be coming in from the back. You're going to be scanning in this direction. So now the fact that your eyes are coming in might give you a better chance of keeping your body in, right, which will allow you to be able to hit or recognize that cross-angle breaking ball that's coming away.
Wow. Wait, let me make sure I'm clear on this. You really hit a hot spot there. Are we saying that, I'm not even sure if this is correct, you don't want to see the ball out of the hand pretty much on that lefty. You want to see it more when it gets to center?
If you look at release points, right, and you talk to major league hitters when they want to talk and when they feel as if you're not picking them and sending information out, they talk about all the different ways to get to this. They never talk about a point, right? They talk about when ball comes out. So right. You've got a lot of different choices. You got hitters that sometimes, and I'll mention Manny because I've been publicly talked about that. Manny always likes to come in from the back. Okay, so he'll open focus and he's going to time it where the ball's coming out, right? Manny's focus level, right? His scan path
is in the middle
area is coming from the backside. You got other hitters that talk about, you know what? I can see the ball and be in a better position to get in front of the ball when I come from the ground up.
Wow.
I can't mention the name of some hitters, but yeah, there's, if you think about it, there's 180 different ways or 360 ways to get to this area, right? That's how many angles there are in a circle, right? And I'm telling you, because I screwed up too many hitters. Chest, build the cap, shift. Great. And we keep going in this direction. And here's the thing that I learned from learning about speed reading, Peter. In this country and in most countries, we read left to right, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, why are we telling all the hitters who face righties to go from here and to shift this way? It's actually going against the grain as to what their scanning habits are used to.
So we should be going the other way.
Correct. That's correct. Or to me, it's freedom of choice. That if you have a hitter that's struggling, hey, you know what? Just talk to me. And this is where I love helping hitting coaches who get it. Leave the swing alone. Game starts. Tony, what can I do to get this guy back on track? Knowing that by now, right, we cannot get too deep on swing mechanics. Telling guys to relax, concentrate, and focus. It's too late. We got to salvage this at bat now by somehow we got to do something, right, to give this guy a chance to either foul off a breaking ball that's right over the black, right, or take a pitch so it's ball 4, or take a pitch so now you've got count leverage that's going on. And a lot of that gets back to getting them comfortable with, hey, you know what? You got a lot of different ways to get to this area. And that starts in pregame. That starts with a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
The best drill for any hitting coach is to learn how to be quiet and ask relevant questions as it relates to, tell me how you're paying attention. Tell me how you're getting to this area. What are you doing differently? Let that hitter articulate, hey, you know, when I'm going really good, I'm not looking at anything. I'm not locked into the release point of the window. So now when that young hitter is struggling, hey, Billy, you know what? Remember you talked about when things are going well, the ball is slowing down and you're seeing the ball bigger. Hey, you know what? You're right, coach. I think you're right. I'm over fixated now on the body. I'm in this fine focus mode. I forgot about the sunsets, mountains, and oceans of open focus. And I'm all of a sudden now staring at a release point or over fixated on the hand, which explains why I'm on the back of the ball, which means I'm in not a great position to be able to see where it's going. Those are the discussions that the master teachers, the better hitting coaches, are going to have if we're going to rescue these great swings. And I'm telling you, Peter, that the coaches that are still listening, hitters want more of this information, right? They don't want any more the perfect swing. There's no such thing as a perfect swing. Look no different than the big leaguers. Watch what these guys do with 2 outs. Watch what they do in high stress at bats. They are kinetically disgusting. They are sequentially crap. But guess what? They were on time because they controlled the runway and they bought themselves more time to make decisions later into that go zone area. That's what we have to do at the amateur level. And I think that's something that I hear it all the time from college coaches. Man, we got all these guys that can swing. The bat speed and the exit velocity and hitting home runs will probably get you a scholarship, or you'll get past the first level of inquiry. You get to college now, and all of a sudden, what's happening? This and this, and you're still thinking that the swing has something to do with hitting in a game. That's why we have the minor leagues, and quite frankly, even at the major league level. Isn't it amazing that, well, he's a career 230 hitter. He's a career 240 hitter. And those guys are constantly changing their swing over and over again. Well, what if those guys said, you know what? I got to blow what I'm doing out over here, some of this stuff that we're talking about, I need to change my visual search strategy. Maybe I'm one of those hitters that's over fixated, right? That is looking at the ball too hard, that has no understanding because it hasn't been presented to them yet about space and this runway. Now, all of a sudden, that same swing, which was a 230 hitter in pro ball or even in college, they're a 310 hitter now because they have count leverage, right? They are saying no. Their chase rates go down. They didn't change their swing, right? But now all of a sudden, they're seeing things that they've never seen before. That's what we have to start teaching at the younger level.
Tony, we've got about 5 minutes left. I've got to ask you this to kind of close it off in some ways. You talked about the K-Vest. There's also some technology out there with vision, you know, the glasses and all that, the Nike glasses. But that's one area. But the other part I want to kind of finish it off with is this. To take all this, if you're at, you know, a Tony Abbatine practice, and you're a coach and you've got different things going on. You mentioned, you know, drills are determined on the player, not one drill fits all.
Yeah.
what's this look like in a practice when you lay it out? What kind of training? A couple drills, you know? I know,
Well,
I know it's a big question because there's so much to it, but a general idea where some coaches would go with this.
we started with the concept and the quote from Manny Ramirez, when I look at nothing, I see everything, which led me to Dr. Femi and open focus. And the way in which, how and what we pay attention to affects our visual processing and affects our mindset. I am thoroughly convinced of that, okay? We live and play in the visual world. So in the typical practice, and I know with Team USA, in instructional league, and even some players that have found their way into New York now, we're going to go outside and I'm going to teach them the magic of looking at nothing. I am going to reintroduce them to space. I'm going to get them to understand that the harder you look, the less that you see. I'm going to show that 12-year-old or the 22-year-old that the space between home plate and the pitcher's mound, which I call the runway, is everything, okay? It has information that is sitting there over and over again. And I'm going to do selfies with these hitters, because selfies is that one hitting drill that gives them control of timing, and it forces them to actually see pitches coming from a different direction. I'm going to lay them out in the outfield, and we're going to go through breathing meditation if we have to, because the power of the breath is a great way to disengage the cognitive thought process that goes on with the swing, that so many hitting drills and the swing experts want to talk about. And even sometimes even some of the sports psychologists, they get too deep into the cognition and the thought process that goes on. I need to shut that down. I need the eyes to control the body. And I know that's kind of a whimsical answer, but we will start our hitting practice with just asking them, maybe we'll pick a flagpole. I want you to stare at the flagpole and only look at the flagpole. And then I'll say the word O standing for open, and they'll blink, or they'll reset, or they'll reboot. And then all of a sudden, they see the flagpole, they see the rocks, they see the evergreen trees, right? Now for the first time, I'm forcing them to understand the beauty of space and how this space that exists in three-dimensional world that does not exist with glasses, with vision training software, that this is the space, this is the neuronal heaven, as Tim Nicely talks about, that allows our brain to process better information, right? It always gets back to open focus, Peter. And I think that's important. I think hitting coaches have to give their students more time in between, right? Because if we're machine gun firing everything over and over again, that has a tendency to bring them back into fine focus, right? We want them to understand I can control this at bat by controlling and acknowledging that the space that I have to manage, the space that I have to sync up with the ball is part of what I have to do. And I think getting back on the hitting side, whether you're working on the tee or whether you're working on center toss, work short, look long. That no coach, if they want to better prepare their hitters for the visual realities of a game, they should not be looking at the L screen. They should be looking past you. They should be in open focus. They'll be able to see you and they'll be able to see the ball come out, but at the same time, they can actually see what's going on in the back. That's going to give them this scanning action and them learning that paying attention and not over fixating on the source of the target becomes what they're really going to need in a game. They don't need any of this for batting practice, right? Everything that I just talked about, those of you that want to continue to have really good players that have competitive anxiety, that look really good in the tunnels, but you wonder where the heck the swing went once the game starts, with the emotional and visual stressors that we talked about, you need to start understanding this. This is not easy stuff, okay? Most coaches run away with it, and they continue to talk about focus on the ball. Why are you swinging at balls outside the strike zone, right? Swing at strikes, see the ball. Okay, well, guess what? Hopefully tonight, Peter, your audience now realizes we've given them some meat and potatoes on how seeing the ball is important. It's not about looking at the ball, but seeing now becomes this continuum, if you will, that'll make hitting in games much more easier.
All right. Great way to end it. Tony, can't thank you enough, man. Sorry, folks. I've got to be on a show here in a half hour also. We took Tony a long time. And last minute thoughts, Tone.
Peter, thank you again. Continue to do what you do best. You know, you talk about outside the box, okay? Yeah, continue to be in front of the box. No pun intended. And I think it's important to the coaches that are out there, right? Just because it's on Twitter, just because it's on a website, just because somebody has a fancy, whether it's MLB or college logo on it, it doesn't mean that they're right, right? Use your common sense. If you can't own it, don't teach it, right? We live in a world of information overload. I'm telling you that your hitters and your players need more emotional and visual love. They need more of this topic, right? It's going to make them better hitters, better pitchers, and it's certainly going to get them to understand that when the game starts, we need to play the game less with our thoughts and more with our eyes. Thank you, Peter, again.
All right. Thanks, Tony. And thanks, folks. And we will email you Tony's information on how to get a hold of him. So don't worry. I know there's people that want to talk to you. So we will do that. Thank you to Tony Abbatine. Thank you to Brian Kroc, our producer of the Lineup Media Group. Thanks, obviously, to all our listeners on Zoom, also on Twitter, Facebook, and also on the podcast, because this audio will be on the podcast. Don't forget, this show will be on YouTube at Peter Caliendo. Cannot thank you enough, folks, for joining us. Appreciate it. If you like the show or any show we have, please spread it. Thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo. Remember, this is a show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love to challenge the status quo. Have a great evening, great morning, great night, wherever you're at, great afternoon. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next show.